Meanwhile, in Georgia, Fulton County DA Fani Willis is in a fight to keep her job and control of the investigation into former President Trump. Willis is looking for a big victory tonight in a Democratic primary, despite the intense scrutiny she's faced for her past relationship with a former special prosecutor on the case, Nathan Wade. She told our colleague Rachel Maddow last night she will not back down despite Republican efforts to undermine her.
Having prosecutors that are free from interference and are allowed to just look at cases, look at the facts, and if people broke the law to bring charges, has to go on for us to live in a free society. The sad part, though, for all of them, Ms. Maddow, is it doesn't matter how many times they attack me. I am not going to be broken, and I am going to still be standing here doing my job lawfully.
Back with us, Danny Savalas, Chuck Rosenberg, and Catherine Christian. We also have, by the way, everybody, the talk about the fake elector scheme in Arizona. First up to you, Danny. Fani Willis is fighting for re-election. My question was, why would she give an interview to anybody? I mean, we love that she gave it to Rachel, but given the circumstances she's in, why would she give an interview to anybody in a moment like this?
Well, when you think about it, it was her essentially not giving an interview, but giving a speech that formed the basis for the defendant's original motion to try and disqualify her as a prosecutor. They argued in that motion that what she did was a kind of forensic misconduct, which conjures up images of fingerprints and DNA. But it really just means that it's something that, based on her speech that she gave, that caused the case to be tainted and that she should be disqualified. And now this case is before an appeals court. And essentially one of the main arguments is that the trial court found that, yes, there was something wrong really with her testimony. There were issues, but they say that the judge failed to take the second step, which was disqualify Willis. And of course, in their view, simply giving her the option to get rid of the entire DA's office or just one guy wasn't enough. And it's the kind of thing that needs to be remedied on appeal, or else they argue it will taint the entire trial as to all defendants. So it's probably not the best idea to be giving interviews if your extrajudicial statements are the focus of that very appeal by defendants who are looking to throw you off the case.
Whatever you think, Catherine, about what she did in terms of making public her relationship or not making public her relationship. She made a point last night, first of all, something she talked about on the stand, how this has upended her life, how she's paying both her mortgage for the house she raised her children in and also has to live somewhere else for safety reasons. But she talked about what's happening with the Republican-controlled legislature in her state. She now has a lawyer, former Governor Barnes, because they now want to have a prosecutorial oversight committee. And the point she made was 14 minorities were elected to office to serve as district attorney, and suddenly they need an oversight committee to look after district attorneys because she says they want to tell us how to prosecute and who to prosecute. Are you troubled by this, the legislature's actions?
I'm troubled when politicians interfere in prosecutions because it's not supposed to be political. You're supposed to let the prosecutors do their job. And obviously, if prosecutors overstep, hopefully they will themselves be subject to discipline. But if it is true that they're doing this because they're upset that she's prosecuting Donald Trump, that's a problem. I don't know if that could be proven. She says that suddenly this happened. But it's always a problem when politicians sort of interfere, particularly in what prosecutors are doing.
And here she is running in a primary contest. So I think that the fact that she did an interview, she's out giving speeches, she's at rallies. If you're going to have an elected prosecutor, the DA, they've got a campaign. So there's an inherent conflict in that between being above the fray and being right in the middle of it. And it does seem like the state legislature's proposal is completely one-sided, is really aimed at her, at one person, for whatever lack of judgment she showed, that the judge on the case ruled that it could be cleaned up by his departure rather than by a wholesale, start over.
The irony of this, Truck, and she points this out again, only 14 of the 50 DAs in the state, she says, are minorities, but they have jurisdiction over very much the majority of voters. Voters put them into office. Voters said, you're the ones we want to make these decisions about what gets prosecuted and what doesn't.
Yeah, and I go back to what Catherine said, and I agree with Catherine. There is an inherent tension, I think, when a prosecutor is also a politician. But politicians should not generally interfere with prosecutions. And there are other remedies, right? You saw one here. And Chris, maybe some folks think it was inadequate when Judge McAfee ordered that, either Nathan Wade or Fani Willis step aside from the case, and Mr. Wade did. And, I think Judge McAfee got it right. The defendants are challenging that. That's fine. That's their right. I imagine he'll be upheld. But there is that inherent tension. Andrea, you know where else you see that? Where judges run for office.
I was thinking about that.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, that doesn't happen in the federal system, and you can say what you want about the federal system. That's where I come from. I'm biased. I think it's the ideal. But judges running for office, you also have that inherent tension.
Of course, then you've got the Supreme Court, which is another whole story. Life tenure and no review by people who arguably get political and have ethical.
I think that's a feature. I think that's a feature and not a bug of federal judicial appointments. I know there's a lot of folks who disagree with me, but I think the notion that you don't run for office, it's still a political process to select them, no doubt.
Sure.
But you don't run for office and then enjoy lifetime tenure, I think is an advantage over running for office as a judge.
Can I ask you about Judge Aileen Cannon, because she's hearing more motions to dismiss, still has not set a trial date, What's going on?
So I have said this over and over. I don't think there's anything nefarious here. I happen to think she's bad at her job. And by the way, that's true of lots of people in lots of professions. You could have a plumber come to your house, Katie, and he's bad at his job. You could be in an airplane that loses.
Yeah, but I can fire the plumber and I can get somebody new in.
So that's the disadvantage, perhaps, of lifetime tenure. But you take the good with the bad. I think the problem here is that she is a relatively new judge who's had relatively few cases and zero of this level of complexity, and is not able to move her docket. But again, that could just be bad as opposed to nefarious.